This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Michael Covel. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. One of my more popular guests on this podcast is an investor named Brad Rotter. And apparently, Brad knows everybody. He happens to know my two guests today, and he happens to have made the connection for me and for you guys to hear my guests today. My guests today are Mark Victor Hansen and Crystal Dwyer Hansen, husband and wife team. Now, you might recognize that name, Mark Victor Hansen. That would be the Mark Victor Hansen who is the co-author of the Chicken Soup for the Soul book and series. I don't know how many books have been sold exactly under the Chicken Soup for the Soul umbrella, but it's hundreds of millions. Seriously, that's insane. Absolutely nuts. Today, Mark and Crystal and I go through all kinds of subjects, but we wanted to focus today on their new book, Ask, The Bridge from Your Dreams to Your Destiny. I must say that it's one of those topic areas. If I did not have the ability to ask, I would be some guy sitting there working for a federal agency in the Washington, D.C. area, fatter than a house, in bad clothes, sitting at the cafeteria, and waiting for retirement. That's what would happen to me. But I started asking people for help, for understanding, for insights. And that helped to propel me to where I am today. Now, where I am today might not be that great to some people, but I think it's pretty cool. So I love the fact that I get the introduction from Brad Rotter, and I love the fact that I get a chance to hear from two very experienced people on the idea of asking. Without any further delay, let's jump right into my episode today with Mark Victor Hansen and Crystal Dwyer Hansen.
What time is it in Saigon? Crystal and I are here.
Hi, Michael.
Hey, Crystal. How are you? Nice to meet you both. It's 7 a.m. in Saigon, but I'm an early riser. I get up when the sun comes up, so I get up around 5:30. So.
Oh, good. I used to be a newspaper boy, so I'm an early riser myself.
I wasn't until the last couple years. I had a yoga class that shifted to early, and I so wanted to go to that class that I rechanged my life. Instead of going to bed at midnight, it's falling asleep at 9:30, 10 now.
Wow, good for you. That's a good reason to change your schedule. I like that.
What do you do in Vietnam, if you don't mind my asking?
That's a fair question. I was happily living in San Diego in 2012, and I had written a bunch of investment books, kind of how I met Brad. I got invited by a Hong Kong bank, CLSA, to give a speaking tour across Asia. One thing led to another, and they said, well, let's make it for 4 months. Let's spread it out. It'll be world class, 10 countries, 50 presentations. And I'm like, hey, twist my arm, let's go. I thought I was going back to San Diego, but in the middle of that trip, I had an unexpected detour and I ended up in Vietnam. And then when the trip was over, I thought, well, gosh, I love Asia. I'm not leaving Asia. And my last stop was Bali. And I thought, well, gosh, I'll just live in Bali. Why not? So I lived in Bali for 2 weeks and I was like, please get me off this island. I can't take this. I have to get somewhere that's normal. So I said, where did I have the most fun in 4 months? And that included all these places, Tokyo, Shanghai, Singapore, etc. And it was like, hey, Saigon was the winner. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. There you go. So now I'm here engaged and there you go.
Do you speak Vietnamese, Michael?
I do not. Yeah, crazy, huh? I'm not saying that in a bragging way, but just kind of, you write books, you do podcasts. My brain only can go so far.
Are you banking then still, or are you just writing books and selling them in Vietnam, or what are you doing?
My world, going back to, let's say, 1996, I put my first website up. I do educational classes for investment training, and that's all been online for over 20 years. So I'm one of these people that can live anywhere.
Right, because your work is through your computer. Yeah.
Same as you guys, really. I mean, I guess if you have to do in-person stuff, it's harder, but you guys get that deep in your bones.
Yeah, we get it, especially now. I mean, everything we're doing, all of our live events got canceled, obviously. And so we've just been doing so many podcasts. It's crazy.
And as you know, we've been talking in Vietnam last 2 years until now. They keep having us back because the people fall in love with us and love our books. And the people are totally lovable. And I tell all of them, just don't let China take over.
Well, they don't want that. They might need our help at some stage of the game, but they definitely don't want that. We just opened up in the last week. We were basically shut down for 3 months, and we just opened up. I hope it won't be an issue, but it's such a young population. 50% of the country is under the age of 35, so that's 50 million people. They're very skinny. It's the least obese population in the world, so I'm keeping my fingers crossed that this is good for my current domicile.
Right. From everything we're hearing, the original data was so bloated, all that predictive data, it was all wrong. And so what the real data is showing, and so many doctors are trying to reveal this to people here, is that it's the same as the flu. In fact, it could be less deadly than some of these flus, because last year's flu was really, really bad. So why are we still locked down? People are getting really antsy. Some of the conservative states are opening up here, but other ones really using it as an opportunity to sort of socialize our whole system, which is really not going well. It'll be interesting to see how everything flushes out here.
I try to sometimes explain modern America to Vietnamese, this place of hustle and everyone's working. They sometimes might not have the bigger goals that we might have in America, but their hustle factor is off the charts. And I try to explain modern America, and they just look at me and they can't wrap their arms around it.
In what way? What are the things?
Well, they don't understand. Like I explained to my fiance yesterday that America is toying with the idea of giving everyone per month $2,000, whether they work or go to school or anything. And she just looked at me and she said, she doesn't know anything about her economics. She goes, well, how can that work? That's the obvious question.
She's smarter than 50% of our politicians.
And probably 50% of our population doesn't understand.
Right.
There's Econ 101, which Crystal and I go over all the time, is there's no free lunch. And Econ number 2 is that the government giveth, the government taketh away.
The government giveth, the government owns you. And that's not what Americans want. Most red-blooded Americans don't want that. So we do have a divided country.
It's interesting that we are having a little bit of a political conversation here at the top. And I do know that your message is, of course, nonpartisan. Your message is just for humans. It's how to take the next step forward, how to get ahead. How do you both handle such a divided country these days?
By the way, there's a lot of answers to that, but the answer that we believe is that the only thing that's ever worked in history is free enterprise. We are friends with Dr. Ben Carson because we won the Horatio Alger Award like he did. We've been friends with Ben for a couple of decades. And Ben says the reason America is great is we did exactly what Vietnam's doing in our experience, which we love to work generally, and we have phenomenal, extraordinary ingenuity. Now, I believe everybody everywhere can start to experience ingenuity, and that's why we wrote the book Ask, because what we discovered, Michael, is that we love all the people everywhere, but people with great talent, skills, education, totally personal. But when we started analyzing, having been in 80 countries, what works and what doesn't work, the one variable is asking. They had the ability to ask. So success comes from the ability to ask, to go in the right direction and figure out what it is you want more than anything else in the world.
That word ask, the title of your newest book and where we're going today. We'll dig all over today, of course, but that word ask, I thought about it in preparing to talk with you both today. It's such an important word, and everyone has their own version of it, but I relate 100% to where you both go. And most people, I don't think, really understand the opportunities that exist in the word ask. Because most people out there, if someone surveys the landscape and they're like a young person and they don't have any connections and maybe their family's not that good, they don't understand that they can reach out to complete strangers and complete strangers will help them. But there's so much baggage and fears and just not knowing how to do that people often don't even take the step. And maybe they'll sit there for decades and never even try because they didn't know, they didn't need permission. They could just ask.
It's so true, Michael. It is so profound when you learn this lesson. And what we found out, we did a lot of research for the book, and we found that going into the study, people had the perception that was just the opposite of the truth. And that was that if they asked something of someone, that they would be perceived as being stupid, uninformed, or maybe flat out rejected. So they hold back and don't do it. But the reality is that people are 80% likely to help you in some way if you ask. There's a really high likelihood that you'll get your needs met if you're just willing to open up and ask. It's so important for people to understand that. But we say the asking journey is much bigger than that. There are 3 channels through which we need to learn to ask, and that is ask yourself, ask others, and ask God. If you can learn to master those 3 areas, life expands enormously.
I will share with you how I ended up speaking with you, even going back farther than my story of Vietnam. So in the early to mid 90s, I finished graduate school. I've got an MBA, great, an MBA and no job. I want to work on Wall Street. I looked at the alumni office at Florida State University. That's where I was just graduating from. And there was nobody on Wall Street with a Florida State degree, except I remember the alumni officer looking at me and goes, well, hey, there's one person here, and they just retired as the CEO of Salomon Brothers. And I said, I'll take that name. I reached out to this guy. He had literally just retired, one of Wall Street's 100 top paid. I went to visit with him at his office in Greenwich, Connecticut. And he just, in a few meetings, it was like, wow, that was the opening up. Now, when I asked him, I don't know if I knew anything about Wall Street at all. That was my first meeting. Forget even a local Schwab broker. My first meeting was with a former CEO of one of the largest investment banks in the world. And it was literally just because I asked.
Wow, what a story. And it's that simple. I mean, asking isn't that complicated. You just have to understand. We think it's important to understand the 3 channels and how important it is to utilize all 3, but just to put yourself out there and ask. And we also discovered that people have roadblocks to asking. We define the 7 roadblocks to asking, and those are unworthiness, naivete, doubt, excuses, fear, pattern paralysis. I forgot disconnection, really just being disconnected from the dreams in your heart, which is really a sad one.
Let's talk about unworthiness. This is the one that I guess I got lucky, and I can't say that I got it from family necessarily. It just somehow or another arrived in me, but I never felt unworthy. But I see a lot of friends and family that do, and I don't know how to counsel them. I don't have the tricks and tips in the rule book and the cookbook. How do you begin to help people that feel unworthy?
First of all, I got to tell you that storytelling and parables are the only way to handle it. I mean, that's from a spiritual point of view and a regular point of view. The story I want to share with you, we put in the book, is a guy I've owned 2 companies with, Bob Proctor. Back in the 60s, Bob had already been in the Navy in Canada for 4 years, came out as a fireman and making $4,000 a year, and he's in debt $6,000. Sits in the bar one night, looks around, goes, holy God, these guys aren't going anywhere, so I got to find somebody successful. And he did just what we're saying. He went and asked a guy named Ray. He said, hey, Ray, I got to ask you, how is it that you are healthy, happy, well-married, and have more money than anybody I've ever met? And the guy said, well, you got to read this book, Think and Grow Rich, and then you got to go find a place that you can be extremely valuable to the place and make a substantial income. So Bob looked around, found out that window washing was it, started washing windows part-time. It starts to go from being upside down to making 25 grand a month. And then all of a sudden he's exhausted, laying on the streets of Montreal. And first responders, police are saying, do you want to go to the hospital? He said, no, let me just go home and sleep. He asks himself when he gets home, wait a second, if I can't wash all the windows, but I got more work than anyone just by asking, I won't wash any of them. I'll ask other people to wash the windows. He ends up doing it in Toronto and Montreal, Atlanta, Georgia, and UK, making $1 million a month. And then everybody's saying, hey, Bob, you're a young man, 30 years old. How is it you're making so much money? He started listening to audio tapes, changed his life, said, holy cow, I'm going to ask everybody to become rich, because all they got to do is learn how to ask. And then Crystal and I interviewed Bob, and I've known him now for 40 years, and we've been great friends, and we've done videos together and everything. But he said, look, you guys are the best because you're teaching the most critical skill on the planet, asking. And because you asked me, I was just at breakfast with my wife a few minutes ago, and she said, Bob, you're doing so well with your company. What would it take you to do $1 billion? He said, holy cow, I never asked myself that. So because you asked me, I'll figure it out. And he said, because of that vector, which happened, we were interviewing him 6 months ago, his company is well on its way to do that. And they've got people in almost 40 countries already doing this. And we were on a podcast with him with 2 million people in 193 countries. It's really, wow, there's so much power, poignancy in asking. And so many people are afraid to do the simple thing like ask. Look, it did it for you. It's done it for both of us. And that's why we said, holy cow, no one's taught this. So we wrote everything we know about asking. And then we interviewed the 26 master askers. And we said, look, we want everyone to learn this. We've codified it and simplified it step by step in a book to make it work 100%.
I don't want to put you both on the spot, but either of you seen the movie The Founder about Ray Kroc?
Oh, yes. We saw it. Yes.
Love that movie.
It's great. I brought it up because you just mentioned the tapes. In that film, there's the early scene where Kroc is listening to motivational tapes. I do find something really interesting. I don't know where I got turned on to it, but I've always been very open to reading anything that can help me get ahead or listening to anything that can help me to get ahead. I don't think something untoward about it. I do find it interesting, and I'm curious how you address this because you've surely seen this. People that will give you the time of day for a second, but then they don't want to read or they don't want to listen because they just think it really can't be in there. The lessons really can't be in those pages. It really can't be on those audio tapes. It's somewhere else. And that's just going to be a waste of my time because that's not really where the secret is.
Right. And that is so interesting, Michael, because people do think that. They actually think, I'm a transformational life coach, clinical hypnotherapist. Many people think that life is happening somewhere out there outside of them. And the truth is, life happens. Your life experience happens from the inside out. If you're not willing to do that self-examination by reading the self-help books, by doing what we're saying, learning to ask, and that starts with asking yourself because that retrospective journey is so critical. Most people just keep racing through their day and never stopping to ask the questions that would bring meaningful answers and meaningful ideas, meaningful solutions to their lives, possibly revector them if they spent some time with themselves even, just asking the right questions. What do I want? What am I best at? What am I passionate about? How could I do better with what I'm doing with my talents and gifts? There's so many different directions that these questions will take you and the answers that come from them. And that becomes the bridge. That's why we said the subtitle is The Bridge from Your Dreams to Your Destiny, because everyone has dreams in their hearts, but they don't know often how to connect. So asking is this simple tool that we all have inside if we're willing to learn to use it, that will take us question by question, answer by answer, solution, idea to that next step in our journey. And very soon we're evolving. We find ourselves evolving to the place we're meant to go, which is our ultimate destiny.
You asked such a profound question that is layered. Not only do I love the movie Founder, and Ray Kroc did his first McDonald's in my little hometown, Waukegan, Illinois, curiously enough. And of course, Ray and Kroc, the McDonald brothers, didn't like him and thought he was cocky and arrogant and sophomoric, but audio tapes did it. But for me, they did it too. I sold my way through college. My parents didn't have that much money, and I had off and on 3 jobs going through college. And I was given an audio tape by the dean of speakers, a guy named Cabot Robert. Here, he lived in Arizona while he was alive, and it saved his life because he had a health problem in New York. The point is, the tape is called You're Either the Creator of Circumstance or the Creature. I'm bankrupt, and I'm upside down, and I'm hiding under the covers, but I had that one audio tape, and I thought, oh, hell, I'll listen to it because I'm at the very bottom, man. I'm done. I listened to that one. You may be old enough to remember the tape recorders are as big as a book in the old days. A little Sony tape recorder. Cabot created selling tapes from a platform and created a $30 billion a year business. I'd had that around. I had a $400 pitted window, permanently air-conditioned Volkswagen. And you know New York, that is not high style. And I'm listening to a tape recorder right next to my ear, driving around with one hand in a stick-shift car. But that one tape, I listened to it 287 times. I checked it off every time I listened to it. I can give you word for word what Cabot said. But it turned my mind around. And that's why I'm so impassioned. Then I wrote Cabot. I asked him, and it's going to sound terribly naive, but remember, I came out of blue collar, so I didn't know any better. I wrote this very rich man, and I said, look, next time you come to New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, or Boston, let me pick you up. I'm picking up a guy who gets picked up in limos, is getting $10,000 a talk. I'm picking him up in a Volkswagen that he's as big as I am, 6'4", putting his foot through my rusted out old floorboard. He was humble. He didn't care. He let me ask him every question. I inundated this guy because I was so hungry because I wanted to be a speaker and then I wanted to write. And he said, "Kid, I also want you to give me $500. I thought, "You're sitting in my car asking me for $500. What do you want $500? He said, "I'm starting the National Speaker Association. I want you to be a founding member because you've got the burning desire to pull this off. And you, kid, are going to pull it off. If you want me to do forwards to your tapes," which he did, the forward to my tape, he did one joke. I'll do this and I'll stop. Is that he did this joke on his tape. The guy he had was from the South, from Stockville, Mississippi. He said, "I wish the guy who wrote, I wish the guy who wrote the book had written the ad, had written the book. The guy who wrote the book had written the ad, wrote the ad, wrote the book." And I thought, oh my God, he did such a good introduction on my tapes, how to achieve total prosperity. I wish the guy he interviewed me and did a fascinating forward to my tapes. And it was probably better than my tapes, but it was so nice to have the dean of speakers put it off for me.
You know what's really cool about this area that the three of us are mining today is that when we're kids, this stuff is not so hard. When you're a kid, everyone says, "Oh, this is my dream. This is what I'm going to do. And when I get older, this is what I want to be." But something happens, and I want you both to run with this. Something happens. We have that childlike wonder. We have those dreams. We have the imagination. We know what we want to do almost when we're kids. And then something happens. School or society or parents put roadblocks up. Happens all the time.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Michael. That's precisely what happens. We're born into this world with this natural curiosity, this natural desire to want the things we see, to explore everything, to have more, to do better. And that starts to get shut down. And it happens with parents. "Quit asking me so many questions. I'm not going to listen to you again." And so little by little, then we go to school, and it's partially because teachers just don't have enough time. Only speak when you're called upon. Don't ask any more questions unless I call you, just the authority that teachers have in the classroom. So little by little, you get shut down. Then you go into jobs or the military. Again, you're with authority figures. You're told what to do. You have great ideas, but a lot of employers are not interested. Some of the more interesting companies are more open to exploring what their employees' ideas, like Google and other companies like that. But a lot of times it's like you just do what you're told to do. And so that gets shut down over time. And then just life's experiences beat us up a little bit. We lose confidence. We have setbacks. Before you know it, what we found is that most people have at least one of these 7 roadblocks to asking because of life's experience. So we have to make a deliberate effort to recognize and become aware of what our roadblocks are, and then how can we release those? And a lot of that is learning through other people's journeys. These stories are so powerful because metaphors are the patterns that we relate to in our minds.
Is this listened to worldwide or just in Vietnam?
Oh, no. I'm approaching 10 million listens or something and 850 plus episodes, 6 or 7 Nobel Prize winners. It's global. Probably very few people in Vietnam, actually. I just happen to be here because I like being here. That's it.
First of all, I think it's noble. Second of all, one of my many heroes, I got a lot of heroes, but Mark Twain said the reason you have to travel is it debiases you. It gets you rid of I was a student ambassador to India in 1968 because I was doing pretty well as a little student leader, and they said, "We want to get rid of you. And the best way to do it is we'll send you to India and Vietnam and China and Japan," which they did. And it was just amazing. I mean, China was Hong Kong, but which was not really China, although China thinks it was China, at least from my point of view. It's amazing that we all need to be in different places. So I'm glad you're doing this. I hope everybody listening decides sooner or later to go to Vietnam because it's such a spectacular place.
It's something that's actually on a side tangent. I won't go there right now with you, but I'm in the process and been doing so for the last 2 years, working on a screenplay inspired by my experience and kind of a counteraction to what the typical American view of a place like this would be. But that's a complete side tangent. Hey, let me take you back to something about the school part. If I think back to being a teenager and I was not a great student or anything, and I think there was a reason why I was not a great student because, and I could not say this how I'm going to say it then. Maybe I felt it, but I couldn't say it. If I could have said it back in the day in front of the other students, in front of the teachers, I would have said, what are we doing? Why are we sitting here pretending that the kid that memorizes the best because he thinks somebody's going to take care of him, because he memorized the best, is the path. That's really what school seems to be to me. The kid that, okay, I will study and memorize and get the great grades, because when I get the great grades, that will get me a scholarship, that will get me a job, etc. I still want to pull my hair out when I think that that is the foundation of education still.
Exactly, because regurgitation isn't it. What we're saying, the reason asking works, we think, and by the way, I'm spontaneously answering this, but I think I've got it right from our point of view and my point of view, and then Crystal can modify it and add to it. But when you ask, it illuminates your own mind. And each of us need to do that, and we need to do more of it. And even in our testing, we read all of Socrates again. And one time I thought I was a Socratic scholar for a while, but Socrates taught Aristotle. Aristotle taught Plato and then Alexander the Great. And what happened is that he controlled the world, but he did it because they learned how to ask. And what we're not learning now is how to ask, because if you know all the parts of geography, but don't know enough to ask how you're going to get there, how you're going to participate, how you're going to tour all these places, you've missed out on most of life.
Crystal, did you want to add too?
Yeah, with that Socratic method of learning, I mean, when we question something, we're seeking the truth. That's why it's so powerful. And when they use that method in schools, the outcomes are so much better because we're challenging what's accepted to get to the truth. And that automatically expands our minds, expands our learning, expands our horizons. But you're right, in school, that wasn't ever encouraged in a typical traditional classroom.
Let me add one more thing real quick, Michael, and that is one of my heroes is Abe Lincoln. And Abe Lincoln is in the debates with Douglas, and Douglas is demeaning him and saying, and beyond that, Abe is a two-faced, self-espousing thespian. Abe got up and said, ladies and gentlemen, if I had two faces, do you think I'd wear this one?
Mark, let me take you back in time to one kind of historical question for your career. I'm curious because, of course, you had this tremendous success with Chicken Soup for the Soul. When that hit, I can't imagine you expected or knew it was going to hit like it did. But when it did hit and you start to say, my gosh, look at all the books sold, the translations, the derivatives, the other editions, what did you tap into? What did you and Jack tap into? What was it? Look, I'm a guy who's written a handful of books. I've sold hundreds of thousands of copies. I'm not trying to toot your horn or anything, but the numbers that you guys have put together, I mean, it took on a life of its own. It's crazy.
First of all, it did, because what we did is we had a real good model. Even though we had 144 rejections, we kept asking publishers to take us, and they all said, hit the road, Jack. And I said, look, it's okay if you don't like Jack, but I'm a nice guy. We had written a while of a business plan, and I'd asked, well, what could we do if we could do anything we want? And I said, we want to sell $1.5 million in a year and a half. And the first year we sold, I wrote all the goals. I want to make sure you understand it. Jack's the inside Harvard guy, third in his class, brilliant, all that stuff. But I'm the outside marketing, let's slug it out and figure out how to sell more than anybody's ever sold before. And so we sold $1.5 million. Then I said, we're going to sell $5 million, which, by the way, I don't blame publishers now that I look at it for saying, boy, that guy's so naive and pompous. What does he think? And I said, well, no, it gets worse because then we're going to sell $10 million. And then at our zenith, we were selling $15 million a year, and we sold 500 million books. And now we've just created a virtual class. I'm glad that you're doing that. And we've created a virtual class, which you can go to markvictorhansen.com and look at. But it's called You Have a Bestseller in You, because there are 7,000 New York Times bestsellers a year. But if you really understand what we've done, we sold 374 million books in China. So I'm number one in China. I've been number one, been in every BBC show in London. And when you start to understand the possibilities are enormous, and we're in the greatest time ever, because just in the United States, there's 800 podcasts every day. The average American's listening to 7.5 hour podcasts a day, which is eclipsing anything ever done. And I think the podcast is a new radio and TV.
Let me dive a little bit deeper. I mean, look, we could talk about this particular issue for a long time. I just want to kind of see if there's a nugget here I can mine. What did Chicken Soup tap into? How did it resonate with so many people? Because they had to share it with other people for it to resonate so widely. And what was it that was making them so excited to tell their mom or their sister or their friend? What was that psychological element that you guys nailed?
The two main ones, we had 7 determinations, but first of all, they were heart-touching, soul-penetrating stories. And we did a feedbacks of Breakfast of Champions. We had every one of them grade at a scale of 1 to 10. If it was a 10 plus, then we knew we had a home run. It had to cause instantaneous behavioral change. And the stories were always 3 pages or less. so you could read them quick before you go to sleep at night or in the John or whatever you do whenever you read. And most people were short of time. And then we knew the soul of America was hurting. What we didn't get was that the soul of the world was really in deep pain. And that's why it works everywhere, because stories are universal and they make it. And then when I said about testing, when we did Chicken Soup at the Teenage Soul, our publisher said, this time you guys have blown it. I got teenagers. They buy CDs, concert tickets, and clothes. They go in the mall and I give them $50. I say, what happened? He said, the mall ate it. And he said, nope, we're not publishing that. So we published it and it sold 19 million the first year because we tested it on 12,000 kids electronically at Nickelodeon at the time. And they all said, Jack and I knew these 250 stories were the best. And a lot of them were ours that we personally wrote. And they said, no, they're not. These are the ones that are the best. And so we knew the book worked because we tested it. Most people have the book tested by themselves, their spouse and their agent or their editor. They aren't the best test. If they were the best test, then we wouldn't have had 144 publishers say, we're not taking your book.
This global part that we're talking about, and you've talked about it several times already. Sometimes I'll go to the track here in Vietnam, and it's kind of a little bit of a older track, and most people there don't speak any English, but sometimes the young people will stop me. I'll go out there. I'm 51. I'll go out there and I'll still run sprints. And they'll stop me and they want usually 15 or 16 years of age. Maybe a group of guys will come up. I always just tell them, I say, and they speak a little English, and I'll say, listen, master your English. You guys have got the internet. You can do so well once you have that common way that you can communicate. And I'm not trying to say English is all that, but it's kind of become the business language. So I tell these young kids, master English, you have the internet, and you guys can do anything.
And what is their response? I mean, do they seem receptive to advice you're giving them?
It's an interesting question. I went to my fiance's hometown about a year ago for the first time, and her grandma had died. I did not know on the way down there in the Mekong region, she looks at me, she goes, my parents have never met a white guy.
Oh, wow.
This is most of Vietnam, really.
Right. It is pretty remote, especially in the Mekong region, which is really beautiful. But
it's even the same with the young kids, even in a place like Saigon. They don't have a chance to experience something simple like that. I'm on the track. Here's a guy here. He's older than me. He's from America. I can kind of talk to him. They don't have that chance. When you guys start to talk about global, I look at it from the American standpoint. I look at it from the country in Asia's standpoint. And then I look at the numbers of books that Mark has sold. Okay, now we're in the middle of a world-changing pandemic. Okay, yes, those things they don't look all tied together, but they are. And the opportunity for all of us is huge, huge.
Oh, it is. And no one knew how big the Chicken Soup for the Soul series was going to get. But can you imagine if Mark had given up on asking? When you think about that, who wouldn't give up after the first 50 rejections? It's quite remarkable, but that he kept going. But it goes back to what I was talking about earlier, Michael, and that is life is created from the inside out. And Mark he knew in his heart that in spite of the authority, which were the publishers, telling him this is a bad idea, no one's going to buy this book. It will never sell. People won't buy these little short stories. Again and again, rejection. The authority figures saying, no, you can't do this. But he kept coming back because for him, he's always been one of those people that creates life from the inside out. He knew the magic of the stories and he was testing them on his audiences again and again. And they were lighting up and people would come and rave about, you turned my heart. I really have a new perspective. You changed my day. You changed my world. He knew there was some kind of magic in all of his stories that none of the publishers saw for whatever reason. There are just so many lessons to unwrap in that experience alone. Never stop asking for what you want, and don't let other figures of authority tell you what you know in your heart can be done.
Let's talk about destiny. A very important word in your world. You can both tell me about your own destiny and you can tell me about how you've discovered it. But this great simple statement that your work covers, that we're all born with a destiny. Our job, our simple job, is to discover it. I thought about that. I said, gosh, how many people hear that expression or hear that phrase, hear those words together and really believe it? And if they do believe it, how many people get there? speak to destiny. It's such a great word. I want to steal it and use it for something now.
Well, good. Well, first of all, we give you full permission because we don't own it. We think everybody's got a destiny. If you're alive, you've got a destiny, and your job is to find it. And probably, given that we're all in government-imposed sequestration, is that your job is to pivot, your job is to reinvent, your job is to reboot, your job is to rethink. We don't know another way to do it other than asking, and it's fortuitous. I mean, God gave us this assignment. I'm going to do it as a spiritual thing, and we're doing it. But my own destiny, I was in graduate school with a brilliant guy named Buckminster Fuller, finished Einstein's unified field theory, did all these great things. I worked with him on World Game. How do you make the world work for 100% of humanity, make everyone economically, physically successful? If you haven't read Dr. Fuller, Buckminster Fuller, it's a good read, and it'll blow your mind, and he's wonderful. But I tried to be Bucky. In 1974, I go bankrupt because that was not my destiny. For 6 months, I'm hiding out underneath the sheets. I'm living in a sleeping bag in front of another guy's room. And one morning, I thought, really, I want to be a communicator. I really want to write. I really want to talk to people that care about things that matter, that make a life-changing difference. And so I go to my roommates. I'm living in Hicksville, Long Island, New York. 3 guys were paying $100 each a month for a crummy little house, so to speak. And I go and I say, any of you guys know anyone that's young, that's not a professional, not a lawyer, not a doctor, not a celebrity, that's speaking? And the guy in real estate said, I can tell you. He said, go out, here's my little ticket, and go use this little ticket, and you'll get in. They won't know it's not me. Listen to Chip Collins. He's a few years older than you, but boy, is he good. This guy mesmerized me. For 3 hours, he had us laughing and joy and changing our mind, and it was the roughest time in America. So I go up to Chip afterwards, and I ask him, I say, Chip, can I buy you lunch? He said, what do you want? I said, I want to do what you do. Well, he said, I'll let you buy me lunch because I like that idea, but I can tell you the chance of you making it in the business of speaking, 1 in 1,000 kids, you're not going to make it. I said, well, let me worry about that. So he said, I'm going on vacation 2 weeks. I'll tell you exactly what to do if you'll do one thing. I said, I asked, what is it I got to do? He said, stay out of real estate because I own it. You can do life insurance. It's a bottomless pit for motivation. It rolls over 90% a year. Headquarters is in New York and Hartford and Des Moines. You'll have a big career if you could do it, but you're not going to make it. But I'll tell you what to ask and how to do it. Well, he told me how to do it. By the time he got back, I had more talks than he did. First 3 years, I did 1,000 talks a year. And only Tony Robbins and I, as far as I know, ever did that much. I mean, what we're saying is you got to ask for your destiny, but then you got to do massive right thinking and then massive right action to do it. So I was talking as early as 6 in the morning, 8 and 10, and then 2 in the afternoon, sometimes 8 or 9 at night, because I was willing to work. And then I sold in between because there was nothing else for me to do. And I thought I'd die to go to heaven. And they said, yeah, that story in a book. And the first book I did was a multi-authored book. So I learned a role called Stand Up, Speak Out, and Win. I sold 20,000 copies from the platform to little audiences, life insurance agencies, managers, general agents, and some regional meetings. And I made $200,000. I thought I had died and gone to heaven. I was on fire. So it was my destiny to come and speak and write. And just to finish my own destiny, I wrote down, and it's unbelievable. And a lot of people say, well, you can't do that. I said, I'm going to sell 1 billion books. Great friends of ours have said, I thought you'd gone nuts when you said it, but I'm going to live to be 127 with options for renewal because I believe if you got a high quality life, which I do, I'm 72, you might as well have a high quantity of really good life.
I think your destiny is often born out of your most challenging times. And for me, I think one of those times was I was one of those kids who high school was very easy for me. So I accelerated my curriculum and graduated at age 16. Then I married a guy 5 years older than me who said he couldn't live without me. 2.5 years later, I find myself in a new city with no friends, no family, baby on my hip, divorced, and absolutely no idea what I'm going to do to earn money and take care of myself. I had heard about food stamps. Like, okay, I'll apply for food stamps. So the first time I took those food stamps and I went to the grocery store and I was getting ready to hand those over to the cashier, suddenly it's like this epiphany just hit me. And the question was blooming in my head. First of all, how did I get here? And second question was, are you really doing everything you can to get out of this, or are you taking the easy way out? I knew immediately when those questions popped in my head, I knew the answer. As I turned those food stamps over to the cashier, I did it with so much conviction. I was saying to myself, this will not be my future. I will never do this again. To myself, of course. I didn't say that to her. I went home and started asking myself the questions. How do I go to work tomorrow? I was so young, but I'd heard about Kelly Services, Kelly Girls, and temporary service agencies. So I called them and I said, how do I start working for you? They said, well, fill out this application and we'll start feeding you jobs. You can say yes or no. So I did that. And I realized there were other temporary service agencies. So I might as well register for all of them. Then when I would have a better choice of jobs every day. So I started doing things like replacing receptionists in attorneys' offices and filing and just doing all the stuff, setting up booths at malls and doing sales at conventions and things like that. I started realizing that I did have some interesting jobs, and I realized that I kind of had a good business sense and I was really pretty good at sales. So I decided to put myself through real estate school, got my real estate license shortly after that, went to work for the biggest home builder in our valley. In the meantime, I had also been approached and some people said, you should do some modeling. So I approached the largest modeling agency. They took me, they signed me. A year and a half from the time that I had turned over those food stamps to the cashier, I was now working for the largest home builder in our valley. I became the #1 realtor for our company, and I was making great residual income off my national television commercials. I had great Screen Actors Guild benefits. I often think back about that moment because it would have been really easy for me to collapse into my misery and my victimhood. And I had a lot of good excuses. I was a young mother, baby, all these things by myself. But I'm so thankful that I didn't, Michael. I'm so thankful that I asked myself the tough questions, that I followed the answers to my own questions. That's sort of the way my life has always gone. I think you need to sort of parent yourself and you need to be able to ask those tough questions. And you need to be able to have the desire to follow the answers that you get. And when you have the courage to do that, your destiny unfolds if you're willing to follow that journey.
I'm sitting here as I'm listening to both of you and I'm doodling 2 words, energy and success. And I'm thinking to myself, what comes first? Did you both have the energy and then the success followed? Or did you start to have some success and that gave nonstop energy? Because look, some people are going to be listening right now and hopefully they're awake. They're going to realize that both of you have a lot of energy. I tend to think I have too much too, but energy comes from somewhere. It's a state of mind. It's like I wake up, I feel good, I'm happy, I've got energy. A lot of people don't. I want you both to run with that. But I think also sometimes there's a little bit of fake it till you make it. If you can have that happiness, if you can have some energy, even if you don't believe it 100%, good things can happen.
Well, your state of mind creates your state of result. Energy is eternal. I mean, my teacher, Bucky Fuller, said, look, real wealth, because you're a money guy, RW, real wealth equals I times E. Well, energy is all that there is in the universe, either congealed at 100 speed of light, however fast light goes. I can't remember right this second. My mind is 2 things at once. And ideas are infinite. Everybody has a lot of ideas once they wake up and they're awake and decide to be passionately on purpose about their destiny and their decision of where they're going to go and what they're going to do and who they're going to be.
And I wanted to add to that, Michael, if I can. I mean, we're all bombarded every day with a lot of negativity. We can see news 24/7, no matter where we are in the world. It's very easy. It's quite easy for people nowadays to get locked into the cup being half empty, the negativity, just there's so much of it. And we see, especially here in the United States, I don't know if there's as much in Vietnam, but I think anywhere you are, you can get locked into sort of a negative narrative in your mind and it deflates you. Because if you understand just the science of getting rich or the science of success or any of those things, you don't want to fill your mind with the opposite of what you want. And that's what that does. When you are immersing yourself in negative experiences, negative news, and all those things, you're feeding yourself exactly the opposite input of what you desire. So the output's never going to be good. And so you have to make a deliberate effort to fill yourself with great things, positive things. And that's what I think Mark and I love about being together, because we both wake up every day with sort of the same commitment to life, to embrace life at its best, to look for the beauty, to look for the magic, to look for the romance, to look for the adventure, to look for the opportunity, because it's there. We don't want to look for the opposite. We don't want those things that are opposite of the things we want to be guiding and directing our life, because that is going to pull us off focus. I think that's really important for people to remember. Don't let that kind of pollution into your mindset.
Building on what you just said, Crystal, and where you went, I can think of a news show, a channel in particular, to go unnamed. And I posted on my Facebook the other day, I said, if you actually watch this program for even 30 minutes, maybe even 5 minutes, the amount of negativity, the amount of hopelessness that when you watch this program, you watch this channel for just a short bit of time, it almost seems like your only option is to jump off a bridge. It's that bad. I want you both to address that, but then even take it a step further to isolation. So I think they tie together. So you have so many people right now that perhaps are physically isolated, or even just they're physically isolated. They're not around perhaps their normal groups. And then they're getting bombarded with this information that, like I said, could ultimately just let people jump off a bridge. Speak to isolation. This is a really tough word in the modern age.
I want to speak to isolation, but first I want to hitchhike on what you said. Your mind is an infinitely absorbable sponge. I've never said that before, but it's true. And what you said that you've done, that we've done, is we're addicted positively to listening to uplifting, spiritually minded, motivationally insightful, illuminated people. And podcasts can do it like yours. And people have got to shut off the negative news, because that's what drowned me, and I went bankrupt in 1974. The minute I shut it off and I started listening exclusively to audio tapes, not only was I buoying up, but I could bring up everybody else. I would walk in and literally brighten up a room where people who listen to too much negative news brighten up a whole room and walk out of it. Let me just now go to isolation, if I can just hitchhike on myself. We have one of the stories in our book by a guy named Jim Stovall. Jim Stovall at 19 years old, Michael, is a superstar. He's ready to be NFL. He's recruited. He goes in. He got it. And the doctor comes back and said, kid, I'm sorry to tell you this, but 6 months from now, the medical tests say you're going to be permanently and forever blind. Well, that crushes this kid, because his whole life was, I'm going to be a major football player. I'm big, strong, fast. Well, now he's self-incarcerated in the 9x12 room. And all he's got is his radio, telephone, and television. And he's grumbling. And his mother and dad say, look, Jimmy, go down to the blind meeting and maybe they can help you get out of all this negativity. He goes down there and it's an echo chamber, but the best thing happened. He sits next to a woman who is a blind stenographer for a law firm. He's complaining, and then he says, I used to love to watch TV. I used to love to watch somebody throw a right hook, but I can't see what's happening anymore. I wish somebody would do something about that. She piped up and said, wait a second. And this is for everybody listening. Wait a second. Why can't we do something? We're somebody. Why can't we do it? Why can't we fix it? There's enough problems for all of us to fix it and make a profit. They started something that most sighted people don't even know exists, called narrative television. 14 million people pay $10 a month for narrative TV, so it's a pretty profitable deal. But I get introduced to Jim. I get called by one of my colleague authors and speakers, a guy named Charlie Tremendous Jones. He said, look, I know you're selling 15 million books a year. You barely got time to breathe, but this book you got to read. It'll change your life. I said, Charlie, if it was anyone else, I'd tell you, buzz off, but I will do it because it's you, pal. I read it. It was called The Ultimate Gift. And if you haven't read it, you want to read it. I loved it so much. I wrote the foreword. I wrote the endorsement. Jim Stovall said, if I live 100 years, I'll thank Mark Victor Hansen every day of my life, because I went and made the movie. We made $100 million on the movie. He said, this is a story that you'll resonate with now as a screenwriter. We do the interview with him in our book. Now, I've never met this guy except on the telephone, and he emits oodles of wisdom. He is eclectically wise and insightful and does a great interview with us. But he says, the last line is, I now write books that I can't read, and I make movies that I can't see. Isolation did him a favor. What Chris and I are saying is you got to learn how to ask so you turn your adversity into bountiful opportunity.
I've been sitting here for the last 10 minutes making notes. While I'm doing an interview with you guys, I'm making notes for other business ideas. I mean, if anyone's listening, they're not inspired by the energy, because I think that's something that is just obvious when I have a conversation with a pair like you both, is that the energy makes you want to do something. I mean, at least, I don't know, maybe I'm just slightly nuts, but hey, one final question, because this was how we got connected. We got connected by Brad Rotter, and Brad has been on my show many times, and I met Brad via my second book, which was this true story about this guy teaching these students how to trade. And it turned out that Brad was the first investor in this very famous trader. I don't know. Brad seems to know everybody, but I did not realize until I opened up the book, I did not realize that Brad was in Ask. Why don't you speak to your association with Brad?
Okay, so we also own alternative energy companies because Bucky Fuller said, look, somebody's got to do something and we got to go off petrochemicals. It's a 100-million-year-old resource, but it's not replenishable. So we got to go to wind, geothermal, tidal, solar, and income energy, Bucky called. I made a lot of money. We sold chicken soup for the soul for a fortune. We had money. We looked at a lot of stuff, and we find this guy named John Petrie, who's a Leonardo da Vinci of our time. If you haven't seen John Petrie artwork, he is the greatest living surrealist artist, but he has 250 device inventions like pop-up windmills that go 360 degrees for urban wind. We got pulsating waves so we can take ocean water where there's deep currents, create enough water, energy, and you got to have energy to have water, water to have food, food to have abundance, because we're about to go into problems with food if you may or may not know it. Anyhow, he invents this stuff, so we put up the money. We've helped build the company, and it's doing great. We ask, and we become partners with the biggest company in the business, Caterpillar, until now. There's a governor of Illinois, who I don't appreciate, is not letting anyone, 100,000 engineers working in Peoria, Illinois, cannot finish our projects because the state's closed down. You're not allowed to go to work or you get arrested until June 15th, which is so abhorrent to my mind. So that's that part. But with John Petrie got us to believe that we could do all these great inventions, and we keep asking him, how do we do it? And you can ask him how to solve any problem, and he can probably figure it out because he's just got the mind of Leonardo da Vinci. So Brad Rotter comes and meets John Petrie, and he has a company called Watership Blue, where he says, look, you guys create the water. We'll put them in either pipes and send it in, or we'll put it in ocean-going ships that aren't working in different parts of the world. We'll take it into Peru. We'll take it into California, where they can't grow enough crops because there's a lack of water and there's fighting about water. There's no lack of anything in the world when you're thinking right, talking right, acting right, and asking the right questions.
So that's how we met Brad. And I just, after he and Mark had a lot of conversations, well, first of all, I knew they were meant to be friends because they enjoyed each other so much. They would end up on these crazy conversations all the time. And then I got to meet Brad. He came to an event that we were speaking at in Scottsdale to save our preserve. Anyhow, that's a long story, but he's such a cutie. I love Brad. I mean, we all just became fast friends. And now we do virtual cocktail hours with Brad and his wife in isolation because, hey, you have to look for ways to have fun.
I think that's such a nice little end to this conversation today, is because it just speaks to, again, even how we're having a conversation. The world is small when you imagine it as being small, and you can reach anybody. You can talk to anybody. There's absolutely no reason I should be having a podcast other than I just wake up and do it. And you keep doing it. And if you do it well enough, maybe people like Mark and Crystal will show up and speak for an hour. Hey, listen, I appreciate you both coming on. The book, Ask, the Bridge from Your Dreams to Your Destiny. Great stuff. I appreciate it.
We love it. Love to come back, and we'll get you some other people too if you'd like.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I will try to always bring the energy and make sure everyone has a good time and try to get the best out of everyone. That's what makes it for a good podcast, right?
It does. Well, you do a great job, Michael. We enjoyed it completely. And yeah, keep doing what you're doing because it's fantastic.
Y'all go enjoy your evening. I have to think for a second.
Yeah, what time is it? Yeah, you too. And I'm sure we'll connect again.
Thank
Maybe
you very much.
Vietnam when we're there next time.
Absolutely. Take care, y'all.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.